So today's a big day for the Motor City. Detroit's emergency manager is set to begin negotiations with a long line of creditors. Detroit, as you know, is in bankruptcy, facing a staggering $18 billion in debt. What a story this has been, watching this great city in this kind of condition. Meanwhile, we're getting a fresh look at the sad decline of what was one of America's most prosperous cities. Look at these pictures. It's very depressing. Detroit has been, in its history, a fantastic city. And there's a book coming out today called The Devil's Night and Other True Tales of Detroit that is named after a disturbing tradition of Detroiters setting their own neighborhoods ablaze on the night before Halloween. Joining me now is the author and a Detroit native, Zev Chaff. It's good to have you with us, Zev.
Good to be with you.
It is. I said it's heartbreaking because, you know, you think of the great history of Detroit, the car companies, Motown, all of the culture that was so strong in that city. And then you juxtapose that with the notion of the image of people burning their own neighborhoods. Why?
Well, that's an issue. It's a good question. I went to Detroit. This book was originally written in 1990. It was reported then. And it's just republished today. I didn't think it was ever going to come back, but because there's been a lot of interest in Detroit, it has. Back then, people burned their homes for reasons that weren't clear, but there are really no more homes to even burn. Devil's Night is something that people remember but don't do anymore because the city is actually so beaten up that I don't think there's enough energy for anybody to go out the night before Halloween and even burn anything down.
To what do you attribute? You know, there's a lot of talk about the unions and their impact on the car companies, the promises that were made in terms of pensions and basically money that just ran out at those companies. To what do you attribute the decline of Detroit primarily?
Well, there were a lot of factors, as you say, but one of the underexplored factors is the racial one. Detroit had a terrible riot in 1967. It precipitated an enormous flight of whites and then middle-class blacks out of the city. And that happened in other places too, but in Detroit, uniquely, there was a mayor, Coleman Young, who was an enormously attractive and charismatic guy, but he made one very terrible mistake. He decided that he would rule Detroit when he became mayor as a majority black city as though it were a sort of a separatist city in opposition to the white suburbs. And he and also the people in the suburbs created a relationship which, for me as an Israeli, reminded me of the animosity that I saw between Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, there was really a degree of hatred. And it became clear that a city, even a city as great as Detroit had been, can't survive in America as a separatist racial city. It just can't. It needed the cooperation of the suburbs, and the suburbs needed Detroit as an anchor. And so what I found when I wrote this book, and what is still true today, was that this was an inevitable kind of a decline.
Let's talk about what we hope will be the silver lining for Detroit, because it really has, I think, become a symbol. It's almost the canary in the coal mine. If the canary can survive in Detroit, if this city can come back under what looks to be some very responsible managers who are trying to take control of it and basically be realistic about their financial obligations and what they can do, it could be a beacon of hope for the country. It's possible, right?
Look, anything's possible.
You don't sound too optimistic.
Well, you know, I certainly wouldn't have predicted back then, and I'm surprised even now, that the city is being run essentially by a Republican governor.
For the first time since the 60s.
Well, yes, actually for the first time ever, but there haven't, you know, I mean, Detroit since the 70s was run really as a black majority city. And the fact that and of course a Democratic city, and the fact that it's now under gubernatorial control, and there's also a viable candidate for mayor who isn't black. And this is the first time that's happened really since the 1970s. I don't want to say it's hopeful in the sense that someone as white or black would be better either way, but the fact that the racial issue is less acute in Detroit, I think, is important.
It sounds fascinating. Devil's Night and the Other True Tales of Detroit. Good to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Good to be here. Thank you.